The royal halls of Lyran were carved from pale stone that shimmered under the planet's twin suns. For generations the Lyran people had considered humans curious but unimpressive visitors from a distant spiral of stars. Their warriors trained in gravity, twice that of Earth. Their bodies carried shimmering patterns like living armor. Their leaders were known for pride sharper than their blades. None embodied that pride more than their princess, a tall and fiercely disciplined figure named Lyra. From the day she reached maturity, she refused every suitor chosen by the council. No warrior impressed her. No scholar outmatched her. No diplomat intrigued her. Her people learned that she would bow to no one and accept no partner unless they could prove themselves beyond question. Most males in the palace whispered that she would never choose anyone because none could rise to her unreachable standards. The arrival of a Terran vessel was treated with polite formality. Lyra attended the welcoming ceremony only because council tradition demanded it. Among the crew was a technician named Dan. He was not a commander or a decorated officer. He was simply a specialist sent to help repair a fractured energy array that the Lyran fleet had failed to stabilize. From the balcony where she stood, Lyra watched him work in the courtyard below. He wore no ceremonial armor. He carried no legendary weapons. He did not attempt to bow. He only walked toward the damaged array with calm focus. When one of the Lyran warriors mocked him for his lack of grandeur, Dan answered with a shrug and kept working. Lyra's eyes narrowed. Prideful males never ignored insults so casually. Dan moved with a quiet efficiency that drew the attention of many guards. In minutes, he diagnosed the fault in the core, something that had baffled Lyran engineers for weeks. He uttered a single request for tools, and then adjusted the inner rings of the power relay. When he stepped back, the array hummed to life with a clean blue glow. The council applauded, but Dan simply wiped his hands and asked if there was anything else that needed checking. Lyra, observing every detail, found herself unsettled. He had shown no desire to impress her, no fear of failing, no interest in the opinion of the crowd. It was as if he lived untouched by the pride that governed the Lyran way. That night, Lyra retreated to her private chambers. Her attendants spoke excitedly about how skilled the human was. She silenced them with a gesture. To her, he was merely efficient, nothing more, nothing less. Yet something in his steady confidence stayed in her thoughts. The next morning, disaster struck. A tectonic rupture beneath the capital released a surge of unstable energy that raced toward the palace. Lyran shields struggled to engage. Alarms filled the corridors. The ground trembled under Lyra's feet. Dan was already in the control center when she arrived. He stood before the shield console, studying the fluctuating readings. The chief engineer yelled that the system was moments from collapse. Dan muttered that the core design was flawed, and the feedback spiral would devour the entire palace if not vented. Lyra demanded a solution. Dan replied that he needed access to the lowest maintenance shaft, a place even Lyran warriors feared because of the narrow space and unstable vibrations. Lyra hesitated. As princess, she was expected to stay safe behind the guards. But the palace shook violently as the unstable surge deepened. Dan looked at the readings again and warned that if someone strong enough did not hold the stabilizer rings in place, while he realigned the vent port, the entire capital might fall. Every engineer stepped back. The pressure within that shaft could crush a normal Lyran warrior. Lyra felt rage burn through her pride when she saw their fear. She stepped forward without hesitation. Dan raised an eyebrow. "This shaft will not be safe," he said. "There is no safe path," she answered. The guards protested, but she silenced them. Together she and Dan descended into the vibrating lower tunnels. Dust fell from the stone as the walls groaned. The metallic core chamber radiated heat like a living furnace. Don pointed to the massive stabilizer rings shaking within their housing and explained the process calmly. Lyra pressed her hands against the rings and braced her legs. The pressure was immense. Her muscles strained. This was no ceremonial workout. This was survival. Don maneuvered deeper into the machinery. Sparks flew. The heat intensified. Lyra could barely hear his voice over the roar of the unstable core. The rings slipped. For the first time in years, she felt true fear. She pushed with all her strength, but the machinery fought back. Her breath grew ragged. Her arms trembled. She shouted for Dan, forcing herself to ask for assistance. She had never begged anyone for anything in her life. Yet now survival demanded it. Don emerged from the vent housing and locked a secondary brace into place. His hands moved swiftly despite the chaos. Lyra steadied the rings with renewed force. With one final adjustment, he redirected the unstable energy through the outer vents. A thunderous boom echoed through the palace as the surge was expelled into the open sky. The tunnels grew still. Lyra collapsed to one knee with sweat running down her arms. Dan reached her side and checked for injury. She waved off his concern, but her chest heaved with exhaustion. "You held it longer than any of your warriors could have," Dan said. She looked at him with narrowed eyes. "You forced me to ask for your help," she replied. "No one has ever pushed me that far." "I didn't do anything but the job that needed doing," he said. "You chose to stand in that space. You saved your people." Those words landed heavier than the pressure of the stabilizer rings. When they emerged from the shaft, the council greeted them with disbelief. Lyra ignored the praise. Her attention remained on Dan, who inspected the vent logs without concern for royal applause. Pride usually irritated her, but his humility unsettled her more. Days passed. The capital rebuilt. The disaster seemed distant, but Lyra found herself drawn to the human technician more often than she expected. She watched him repair cum towers and recalibrate scanners. He had none of the arrogance of Lyrine nobles, none of the desperate ambition of suitors. He worked with purpose without demanding recognition. She approached him one morning in the courtyard. He was adjusting a drone control panel. When he noticed her, he greeted her with a simple nod. No bow, no flattery. "You risked much in the maintenance shaft," he said. She crossed her arms. "Do you think I fear danger? I think you face danger without hesitation," he replied. "But strength without reflection can become a burden. You carry many expectations." Lyra stiffened. Few dared speak to her so plainly. Yet his words were not insulting. They were observant. She respected that. "Why did you come to our world?" she asked. "To help with repairs," he answered. "No greater ambition. Helping is enough." His simplicity frustrated her because she could not understand it. Lyrine culture valued grand purpose. Dan valued function and quiet improvement. One evening the council arranged a feast to honor the human crew. Lyra attended, but watched Dan more than she intended. When a group of Lyrine nobles questioned why a mere technician had been invited, Dan responded politely and continued eating without offense. Lyra felt anger rise within her at their disrespect. After the feast, she walked beside Dan through the outer gardens. The sky shimmered with drifting particles from the twin suns. She asked him why insults never affected him. "Because they don't change the truth," he said. "And what truth is that?" "That worth is proven by actions, not words." Lyra looked at him in silence. That principle was foreign to her people, who valued ritual and lineage above all. Yet his view felt strangely liberating. The next day, an unexpected threat arrived. A hostile faction from the outer territories launched a raid on the capital's perimeter. Alarm sirens filled the air. Warriors rushed to defend the walls. Lyra armed herself and moved to the command post. Dan was already there analyzing shield data. He informed her that the outer grid was weakening. She ordered her warriors to reinforce the east side, but Dan warned that the attackers were using a pulse disruptor that could bypass traditional defenses. He suggested modifying the shield angle to reflect the pulse rather than absorb it. The chief warrior scoffed, but Lyra silenced him and commanded Dan to proceed. Dan's adjustments redirected the next disruptor blast, which ricocheted toward the raiders and disabled their advanced vehicles. Warriors surged forward and captured the attackers. The council praised the victory, but Lyra knew the true reason they survived. She found Dan on the outer platform, checking shield logs again. He looked exhausted, yet satisfied. She approached him and for the first time offered thanks in her own way. Her voice softened. "You have changed much in my palace," she said. "I only did what I could," he replied. "You did more than that," she said. "You forced me to grow." He shook his head. "You did that yourself." "I only helped when needed." Lyra studied him with a calm intensity. For years she had refused all suitors, because they sought her throne or her lineage or the prestige of bond with royalty. Dan sought none of these things. He looked at her not as a prize, but as a person. In the following days, she invited him to walk the palace grounds with her. They discussed technology, culture, battle strategy, and personal principles. Dan never tried to impress her, yet everything he did left an impression. Lyra found her pride shifting into admiration. The court whispered, but she ignored them. One afternoon she led him to the highest balcony overlooking the capital. The wind carried sweet notes FR